Kalluto Zoldyck has a parasocial relationship with his own brother. Hello and welcome back to Suckwar Central. My name is CJ, and I want to talk about all the overall weirdness surrounding Kalluto Zoldyck of the Phantom Troop. Because seriously, nothing about this goober adds up. Kalluto is a character that can very easily fade into the background of Hunter x Hunter. It's quite common for people to just never think about them that much, and I confess that I made the same mistake when I first read it. But as soon as you start paying any attention to them, you go, hey, wait a minute, what the hell is this person doing? And also, what's with all these completely random ass facts we know about them that don't seem to add up into any coherent story whatsoever? Side note, given that a bunch of different characters have referred to Kalluto with conflicting genderization, I thought genderization wasn't a word, I just made it up, but my Google Doc didn't underline it red, so I guess it is. Anyway, point is, until the manga gives us more info, I'll refer to them however I like at any given time because no one can stop me. As I was saying, Kalluto's position within the Zoldyck family, though never spelled out, can be pretty easily inferred via context clues. Kalluto's doted on by their mother, but the Zoldicks are a pretty patriarchal family, and Kikyo doesn't have a lot of power in it, at least not compared to Silva, who pretty clearly establishes himself as the executive decision maker at the end of the Hunter exam arc. Thus, Kalluto being mom's favorite is pretty meaningless in the grand scheme of things. The family has already decided that Killua is their prized child, the heir, the favorite, leaving Kalluto in the dust, which might I add is incredibly unfair because this kid is insanely talented. Here's a reminder that Killua learned Nen at age 12 and learned a Hatsu at age 13. Kalluto, meanwhile, out-stealthed several members of the Phantom Troop, displays multiple complicated Hatsus at age 11, showcasing exceptional talent. Wait, what the fuck? Why does Kalluto Zoldyck know Nen? Okay, so this could just be a plot hole, as many people have said, and it might have been at the time Togashi wrote it. However, Togashi is a master of coming up with retroactive explanations that make things fall into place most of the time. Ergo, I think we can assume that regardless of whether or not there was an explanation for this when Togashi wrote it, there sure as heck is now. A common hypothesis I see is that Kalluto was more obedient than Killua, and thus was taught Nen, while Killua wasn't because learning Nen would allow him to actually rebel against his family. However, this explanation doesn't sit well with me because of this panel right here. After using Ko on Zazan, Phaeton gets got by some weak aura. Kalluto is confused and needs this explained to her by Finks. This means that, despite having 3 full-blown Nen abilities, Kalluto is unfamiliar with basic applications and principles of Nen and how they affect combat. Bisky's training shows us that it's important to learn these before fully developing Nen abilities because they can go on to inform and augment the types of abilities you come up with. In other words, Kalluto clearly has not received classical and proper Nen training. That leaves us with 2 possibilities. Kalluto either wasn't trained by the Zoldyck family, or the Zoldyck family are terrible at teaching Nen. Something tells me it's not the latter. So where the hell did Kalluto get these abilities? Well, due to their nature, I'm going to posit that Kalluto's Nen abilities were actually subconsciously developed due to the kid's incredible talent, a la Neon Nostrad or Terror Sandwich. Let's do some psychoanalysis here. See, I think Kalluto's abilities perfectly represent his feelings about his family, which, oh my goodness, I completely forgot to continue addressing that because I got sidetracked by the Kalluto has Nen bit. Let's pull that chart back up, yeah? According to it, Kalluto is envious of Alluka, which is really such a random-ass piece of information to throw in. Why would you envy a genie-possessed iPad kid locked in a basement? Alluka really gets the short end of the stick from everyone except Killua. Aha! Kalluto wants to be buddies with Killua. Why? Well, neglect and conditioning, probably. Even the one parent, who's always paying attention to Kalluto, is also always screaming about how Killua is the greatest and Killua is the future of the family, so on and so forth. Kalluto's a bit envious of that kind of attention, but I do think it's more than that. A lot of people assume the brother Kalluto wants to get back is Killua, and I do agree with that, but they say that it's because she's fixated on Killua in order to prove her worth to the family by returning the golden goose. However, I disagree. Far more logical outcomes of a situation like this, I think, would be that with Killua's departure, Kalluto hopes he never returns, so she can finally take the spotlight and show off her amazing talent. Kalluto should feel resentment toward Killua, not adoration, not a desire to be friends. And yet, being envious of Alluka shows it's not their family's approval Kalluto is after. It's Killua's specifically. I'm going to propose a rather optimistic theory now. I know, very out of character for me. I think that Kalluto was always a little envious of Killua, yes, but not because he commanded the family's respect. I think it was the opposite. Killua has always had a certain level of defiance toward the family that no one else displayed. In the isolated environment of Kukuru Mountain, there is only one voice who dares criticize the Zoldyck family, and it is Killua's. Consider Kalluto's position. They're the weakest person in the Zoldyck family in terms of power, status, and sway, an extra youngest child that can be discarded at a moment's notice. And they just don't have the same courage as Killua, nor could they get away with the same shit because the family doesn't need them as much. Killua criticizes and defies the family and gets his ass beat for it. Kalluto knows they would get their ass beat way harder and fold under the pressure way faster. But even so, I think they looked up to Killua and wished they could have his courage and defy the family. They wanted to be friends with Killua and join the problem children club in the Zoldyck household, so to speak. And think about it, they joined the Phantom Troop, the one group that Silva specifically went out of the way to tell his kids not to fuck with. There's no way in a million years the family would condone that, and what more proof do you need that Kalluto is simply not on board with the Zoldyck family's whole thing? And no, this is not some kind of secret Zoldyck family plan as people have suspected, because again, Silva is very clear, you do not get mixed up with the Phantom Troop. So yes, I think Kalluto slipped away from Illumi after Illumi pretended to be Hisoka in York New City, and Kalluto then asked to join the Spiders. And showing off their nen, the Spiders were like, yeah, sure, why not? Because they had vacancies and don't accept rookies. Oh right, nen. We got here because I was talking about Kalluto's nen. Okay, so Kikyo Zoldyck uses a fan just like Kalluto, and it's logical to assume that Kalluto learned to use the fan as a weapon from her. Kikyo is one of the few other people in the family Kalluto has some level of care for, so this probably was a prized possession of theirs. And we know that manipulators work best with objects they have a strong affinity for, and Kalluto uses the fan in conjunction with paper for their manipulation abilities. I think Kalluto could have easily awakened his nen by accident through strong feelings attached to this fan, and thus developed the nen abilities we see him use later on. These nen abilities also, I believe, reflect Kalluto's personality and desire. First of all, Kalluto's paper dolls let him keep tabs on people, and a tracking ability makes sense when his mission is to get somebody back. But more importantly, I think, Kalluto has a certain sense of FOMO, fear of missing out. Since Aluko is the one who got all of Killua's attention and care, not Kalluto, and Kalluto doesn't know how to make themselves included, the best they can do is eavesdrop with an ability like this. This allows them at least some semblance of being part of the group, and is also just really sad to think about. Kalluto's Confetti Wind and this ability, which was officially translated as Dance of the Serpent's Bite, but based on the kanji used I prefer to call Zigzagging Snake Dance, also represents how they want to grow and change. Side note, I kvetch about the official translation a lot. This is not me doing so again. Dance of the Serpent's Bite is a fine translation. I'm just personally of the opinion, with my interpretation of this character, that a name like Zigzagging Snake Dance is more befitting of a sinister yet goofy child. Like no 11-year-old is gonna call this ability Dance of the Serpent's Bite. If I wanted to really be realistic, I'd call it Skibbity Snake Riz or something, but unfortunately, there is no kanji for Skibbity yet. Anyway, Kalluto effectively accumulates tiny, insignificant bits of paper and batters a target with them doing nothing. But as more and more accumulate, well, surprise, it does something, alright? This, I believe, represents how Kalluto wants to go from an insignificant and overlooked scrap to a dignified, refined creature like a great serpent, imposing, slithering where they please, and dancing their way through anyone who would stop them. I also want to note, both of these are clunky nen abilities and not exactly super well designed. Generally speaking, they're only effective because of Kalluto's relatively incredible proficiency with nen and immaculate stealth skills. That, again, is why I believe these abilities were developed subconsciously or, at the very least, with very little actual practical education in nen. They're the types of abilities a kid would come up with on his own, with no help from anybody who has nen experience. Okay, to be honest, all that interpreting about Kalluto's character took way longer than expected. So let's get into the actual theory, and we're gonna find out just how short I can make this because we do not have much time. Okay, so we've established that Kalluto wants to be pals with Killua. That begs the question, why join the Phantom Troop? How exactly is that going to get Killua back? Oh, by the way, in case it wasn't obvious, I think by get my brother back, Kalluto means restore a relationship with him, not return him to the Zoldyck household. So look, Kalluto made this decision because, to answer the question asked by the thumbnail, yes, Kalluto is stupid, as if this wasn't obvious from Kalluto wanting to stare at the full concentrated power of the sun just to see what happens.
Damn it! I wanna see!
Kalluto probably doesn't know much about the whole York New situation. I assume they just heard the chatter from Illumi or whoever else that Killua was mixed up with the Phantom Troop and an ally of the Chain User in his crazy revenge quest. Therefore, Kalluto reasons, by sticking with the Phantom Troop, Kalluto will find her brother again. However, Kalluto also has the goal of becoming the top dog in the Spiders and leading the Phantom Troop, so why is that exactly? What on earth could that possibly have to do with getting any brother back? Remember, Kalluto is at this point 11 years old. So my shot in the dark with all this is that Kalluto came up with the most 11-year-old ass plan conceivable. Just going to find Killua isn't enough. Remember, Kalluto doesn't just want to meet him. They want to win his respect. The little dude thinks they can take control of the Phantom Troop, impress Killua with how badass they are, and order the members of the Spiders around to resolve whatever feud the Chain User has with them, because it surely can't be that bad, right? After all, Kalluto's from a household where the whole business is murder. It's clear that at young ages, the Zoldicks don't understand just what murder means to the average person, and being around the Phantom Troop is not exactly correcting Kalluto's misapprehensions. So, you know, it's a very naive plan that presupposes many things. That their talent will make it possible, that they can resolve everything by being the center of the universe because they're awesome, and that Kurapika and Killua will still be actively hunting down the Phantom Troop. I mean, as a child, who hasn't made all these mistakes? It's very common for children to assume that the status quo is forever, to set massively unrealistic expectations for themselves, and to gravely overestimate their own importance in the world. Like I said, 11-year-old ass plan. But it's kind of the only one I can come up with that explains Kalluto's behavior throughout Hunter x Hunter. And doesn't seem to be working out for them. At this point, I think they're sticking with the Phantom Troop because of the sunk cost fallacy. Because surely, at some point, eventually where the Spiders go, Killua will be, right? Right? With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this little dive into a silly little murderous latchkey kid and my personal third favorite character in Hunter x Hunter. I hope you'll join me next time when we discuss one of the other Zoldicks or something totally unrelated if I change my mind, and I hope you have a wonderful day!